Do you think one mind is better than many? Neither do we. A University of Chicago Booth School of Business MBA is for curious and collaborative people who value different perspectives and ideas. Chicago Booth takes pride in empowering and being empowered by women of diverse backgrounds. We believe that fostering an inclusive community creates an environment of analytical, open minded inquiry and produces knowledge with enduring impact. Learn more today at chicagobooth.edu/elevate. Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Ellevate podcast. I'm your host, Megan Oliver, and I'm so excited for today because, as you'll see in just a couple minutes, the interview you're going to hear is actually one of mine. Again, I did mention last week, you'll have a few of mine peppered in with plenty of Maricella's. There's still tons of Maricella interviews left to go. But since I started helping her out toward the beginning of the year with recording, you will get to hear occasionally my interviews on the regular podcast. But before we get there, let's go ahead and jump into what is happening at Ellevate this week. So we have our roundtables. Both are virtual networking elevated sessions, and both are on Thursday. So our regular Ellevate roundtable and our entrepreneurs roundtable both are having virtual networking elevated sessions. So much fun if you just want to get your networking on. Both good groups. We also have a bunch of community circles coming up. Today, which is Wednesday, we're having the LGBTQIA one. I host that one. So if you want to see me, I know I said I was hosting the one last month, but I forgot because I was recording ahead of time. I forgot that I was actually on vacation that week, but I am hosting this one. So you will see me if you show up to this LGBTQIA one, I promise. Tomorrow, that's Thursday, is going to be our community circle for Asian and Pacific Islanders. And next Tuesday is going to be our community circle for Black Women Plus. We also have some in-person events coming up, one of which I am so excited about, but I'll get to that one in a second. I want to start off, our Los Angeles chapter is having a happy hour in Santa Monica on Thursday. And the one that I am so stoked about, this team reached out to me to be like, hey, just so you know, we're doing this. And I was like, I wish I was in the DC area because I would be there immediately. Our Washington, D.C. team is hosting a Mystics versus Wings Ellevate Washington, D.C. chapter networking event on Sunday. If you don't know those team names off the top of your head, they are both WNBA teams. The Mystics are the D.C. team. The Wings are the Dallas team. So I did tell the team that, I'm going to be rooting for a different team come that day. I love the WNBA. If you just want to support women's sports, if you just want to support, an amazing, cool game and also get your networking on at the same time, and you're in the DC area, you happen to be in the DC area this weekend, please go. It's going to be so cool. Please go in my stead because I wish that I could go. Mystics versus Wings. It's going to be so cool. Our San Francisco chapter is hosting a happy hour next Tuesday, and our Atlanta chapter is hosting a social networking mixer also next Tuesday. So if you're in any of those areas, be sure to go check those out. I'm so excited. All right. Speaking of excited, let's go ahead and get to my interview with Alana Duerr. She is the director of U.S. projects for Deep Blue Pacific Wind, responsible for the development and implementation of market-specific strategies to deploy innovative and cost-effective floating offshore wind projects in the United States. She's been part of the offshore wind industry in the U.S. since 2013 with experience in both the public and private sectors. This was such a cool conversation because you'll hear it a couple times over the interview. I just kind of got to nerd out with her about, the environment and the oceans and how to best harness, and get the energy that we need while also not harming our planet. And it's such a cool interview. And let's go ahead and get to that now. Hi, Alana. Welcome to the Ellevate podcast.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to record this.
I am so excited. You're one of my first people that I've gotten to interview, and I'm really excited because your background to me is really, really cool.
Well, this is the first time I'm doing a podcast that isn't speaking specifically about offshore wind. So I'm super nervous and excited, and it's going to be awesome.
Yay! But yeah, so I'm so excited. Let's go ahead and get into it. So usually the first question we ask is just, can you give us kind of an outline of how you got to where you are in your career today?
Yeah, so I let's start with where I am, and then I can back into how exactly I got to where I am. So I am the US project director for the Simply Blue group, which is a blue economy developer that's based in Ireland. We're working on developing floating offshore wind projects, wave energy, tidal energy, sustainable aquaculture, e-fuels, anything that aids deep decarbonization while using the ocean as an energy source. And in the US, I'm working on developing floating offshore wind projects with Total Energies as our partner. And specifically, we're looking at projects off of Oregon and the Gulf of Maine to potentially work on developing floating offshore wind projects. But I don't live in either the Gulf of Maine states, so New England or Oregon. I actually live in the suburbs of DC in Northern Virginia with my two kids and spouse. And so, like, how does that work? I don't live near the projects that we are going to try to develop. So how does that all work? I actually grew up in Washington State, which I've added the state since living on the East Coast now for about half of my life, which is crazy. And and I knew I wanted to be an engineer growing up. I was really good at science and math, and everyone told me that I should be an engineer. And so I just decided, well, I should be an engineer. And when I looked for colleges, I was looking for engineering schools, and I found this really unique opportunity to go to the smallest school I think I've ever heard of. It's called Webb Institute, and it is a school that just study naval architecture and marine engineering. That's the only major. And as you might think, well, what's a small school? I mean, my graduating class was 24 people. Very, very small school. And so, but it was such a unique opportunity. It's a school that, you go and you get into your naval architecture and your ocean engineering courses right off, and every winter you get to go on an internship. And that internship is super hands-on. Like my freshman year, I was at a shipyard. My sophomore year, I went on a ocean-going chemical tanker that sailed from South Africa to New York and down the eastern seaboard. Um, it was, and then junior and senior year, you go and you work in a naval architecture firm. That hands-on, unique experience was just too cool of an opportunity to pass up, not to mention the fact it's fully endowed. So all of those things added up, I decided to do it, and it was the best decision I've ever made, and I can say that very easily because I did meet my husband there. So all of the good things came from making that one decision of where to go to college. Um, and then I got interested in renewable energy my senior year there, working on a thesis on ocean current technology and harnessing the ocean current for energy, which led me in my research to Florida Atlantic University, where I did my PhD in ocean engineering to study where in the world you could potentially extract ocean current energy for power. And as I was wrapping up my PhD and knowing that I had to kind of get to the Washington D.C. area because that's where life needed to take us, I ended up at the U.S. Department of Energy through a NOAA fellowship for marine policy, which as an engineer, policy wasn't part of my lexicon at all. But I applied for the fellowship and was kind of an anomaly among the fellows in the fact that I was an engineer, but I ended up at the U.S. Department of Energy, where I switched from working on ocean currents to working on offshore wind. And I was supporting the offshore wind R&D portfolio at the Department of Energy in my first days, and I was there for 6 years, and that and went from this fellowship position, and then eventually I was leading up the offshore wind R&D portfolio there. After those 6 years, I went to the dark side, I guess, and I became a consultant. I worked at DNV for 2 years, leading up the offshore wind team in North America on the advisory side, and it was great to be able to be a little bit one step closer to industry. And I learned so much there about how to build a team and do business development. And I never thought that was something that I could do, but as it turns out, it was pretty fun. And especially building a team and building a business strategy was very just new skills to learn, and it was great. Learned a lot, and then my dream job came along. My current boss, who I've known since my early days at DOE, he said, "Do you want to develop offshore wind projects, floating offshore wind projects in the U.S.?" And I mean, I didn't say it right away, but I basically said, "Where do I sign?" It was such a unique opportunity, and really got at the fact that I think that the technology is so cool, and there's such a huge opportunity for developing floating offshore wind off of the U.S. And so I said yes, and that was in July of 2021. And so I've been with Simply Blue for almost 2 years, and it's super exciting.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I have so many questions. Like, I want to just
I
dive
can
into
take a
so many of
breath.
them right now. But I want to start with what I'm sure a lot of our audience is wondering. Could you define offshore wind for, the general audience who might not be familiar?
Yeah, of course. So imagine, and I hope that most of the audience has at least seen onshore wind turbines. So they they're typically, they've got a big tower, they've got three blades, they turn when the wind blows, and basically offshore provides just a different opportunity to deploy these turbines, which are getting bigger and are able to produce and extract more energy from the wind, and put them offshore in places where maybe there's not any land to develop onshore wind. And so there are a couple of different ways that you can deploy offshore these turbines offshore, and that's either with a solution that is fixed to the ocean floor. So we call that bottom fixed offshore wind. And then as you get further and further offshore, it is not economically feasible to have structures that reach all the way to the ocean floor. And so what I'm working on at Simply Blue is actually floating offshore wind. So you have a floating platform, and that could be made out of steel or concrete. And I promise both of them do float if they have the right geometry. And then you can put a turbine on top of that, and you affix it to the ocean floor with mooring lines, and it floats out there, and the wind turns the turbine, and the power comes back to shore via an export cable that will be along the ocean floor, and then it'll connect to a point of interconnection or a substation onshore to deliver the power to the grid.
That is so cool to me. Like, I can't even tell you the idea of developing, using water, using the ocean as a place of all this. And I have always had such respect for like ship engineers because I don't know how you get a ship to float. That's so crazy to me. And like to me, it's the same sort of thing of like getting a turbine to float and getting like a concrete base to that's just so cool to me.
It is really cool, and I've always thought floating offshore wind was cooler than fixed bottom when I was back at DOE, and leading some research there. And the bottom line, I like to tell people, yes, they do float. We designed them to float for a long time. And one of the great things about being offshore is that the wind is it blows harder. Offshore,
Mm.
it's faster, and so we can produce more energy, and we can also have much bigger turbines, which means that you can deploy fewer turbines and get a lot more energy than you would potentially get onshore. So there's just a huge resource. I mean, I'm focused on the US, and there is a huge resource off of the US coast, but globally there's such a huge resource, and we don't have to build everything onshore, and that provides some really unique opportunities, but of course challenges. Everything offshore is more challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine so. So one of the things I want to ask, you mentioned that from an early age, you were always interested in the sciences, which I love to hear. I was never particularly I always found science interesting, but I was never great at the sciences, but I love seeing women in STEM. I think it's so important. And one of the things when you because you actually sent in a resume for the podcast, one of the things that really stood out to me was that you mentioned that you're part of a leadership team that is more than half of women under the age of 40, all of whom are in STEM positions, which is just amazing. And do you want to talk me through, why is women in STEM important to you, and how did you ever I know a lot of women in STEM have said, "Oh, I was told as a kid STEM's not for women," versus some were told, "Oh, I was always encouraged." Like, how did you navigate that path?
So my team is incredible. I'll just say that. I'm so lucky to have such amazing people and women around, especially I get to spend so much time talking to one of our team who's our environmental and permitting lead, Katie. She's incredible, and she just gets so excited about so many different topics that are related to the ocean and making sure that we are developing projects in a really sustainable and responsible way, and the care that she takes and she thinks about these projects that we're trying to develop is just unparalleled. And so I yes, we have a team that for our women who have STEM backgrounds, and one who is a legal who went to law school, isn't a practicing lawyer, but incredible. Like, we just have incredible women on our team, and I can't say enough about them that would do them all justice. But we spent a long time trying to cultivate that team. I can't say this for everyone, and obviously, Megan, you said it. Not all women are encouraged to be in STEM, and I was very lucky that I had a mom who was a doctor, and so women in science were in my life from birth. And so that to me as a path, my parents were always encouraging for me to do whatever I wanted. And I think that, some external validation of you're really good at math, you're really good at science, and seeing how I did excel at those compared to my peers was, its own set of motivations. I'm a little competitive, so it helped. Um, and so I was always encouraged to do whatever it was that made me happy, and math and science did. I loved Lego. I loved playing with the boys and doing stereotypically boy things, but that never deterred me. I loved it. And yeah, I mean, I can't say enough for the fact that, from a very young age, that no one ever steered me in a direction that would have deterred me from really being the nerd that I am.
I love that. Yeah, it's science I always find very interesting, like, the natural I always thought it was very interesting, but I'm terrible at math. So, like, that was always the barrier for me, was I was like, I can appreciate it and I'll watch, like, documentaries about science, but I'm like, once you get into so much math, I'm like, I'm lost.
And for me, it was always give me more math and give me fewer humanities courses.
Nothing but respect. I was an English major, so I was the complete opposite. My sister is, I've said this before, my sister's an audiologist, and she and I are complete polar opposites, where she was like, give me the science and math courses, and I was like, "Give me the humanities." And both of
Mhm.
us would be like, "I don't know how you make it through those other classes."
Yeah, I think that's similar with my brother and I. He is very much, well, although we both ended up doing policy related things, so maybe we're not so opposite, but at least growing up, we were very very much opposite drivers.
Well, I also one of the things that I picked up on that makes me really happy is you seem to genuinely so love what you do, which I just makes me so happy. How did you manage to, turn to carve a career for yourself in something that you care about so deeply? And, do you have any advice for others who might want to break into industries that maybe they might not that they might not be sure about, but that they're really passionate about?
So it's interesting that, I didn't when I went to college, I didn't have a sense that I was passionate about renewable energy. Growing up in Washington State, I make this joke all the time. I thought all energy came from hydroelectric dams. I just did. And it wasn't until I started actually seeing more parts of the country that I realized, oh, there are other sources of energy that are out there. It was pretty naive. And I I always thought that, seeing new technologies was cool. So I like new technology and different types of technology always interested me. So going into school, I really wanted to be an engineer. I didn't really know what kind. Naval architecture and ocean or in marine engineering incorporates a lot of different types of engineering into it. And it wasn't until, my professor junior year when we were trying to figure out our undergraduate theses what started to say something about, well, I hear that people are trying to pull energy out of the ocean using turbines, and wouldn't it be cool if someone did a thesis on that? And I was like, what? There are people that are thinking about pulling energy out of the ocean. That sounds so cool. And it wasn't until I started to get into, so it was the technology and like that opportunity space that no one was really investigating in a major mainstream way that got me curious. And then taking a much bigger picture approach, then I kind of fell into the fact that, oh, this has a much bigger potential implication for reducing the harmful effects of greenhouse gas emissions. And so, for me, it wasn't that I didn't find my passion for renewable energy until I found a passion for the technology. So it just came and it has grown. And could I have projected this is where I was going to be um 15 years ago? No, there's no way. But as 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 things have gone along and as my career has gone along, I have found that I really enjoy this space. The industry, being able to be part of a nascent industry in the US and kind of grow my career has basically grown up with the offshore wind industry in the US. And so to kind of be part of it and grow up with it, I have become even more passionate about it. And so every day knowing that I'm contributing to an industry that I really love, that I think has huge potential for helping us try to stem the tide of climate change, it gives my day to day, which like a lot of other people, is a lot of meetings and a lot of answering emails. It gives that day to day purpose, and I'm very lucky that I found something like that. So I don't know if that totally answers the question that you asked, Megan, but that's kind of in a nutshell. Like I have fall I have kind of fallen into being so passionate about what I'm doing, and now that I am passionate about it, I just want to hold on to that.
No, I love that. I think the lesson from your story is just like keep an open mind and just you're
Oh
never
yeah,
gonna know where your career is gonna go.
absolutely. Could not have planned it, and definitely have taken opportunities when presented. I didn't plan to leave DOE, but after I left, I realized, oh, that was a really good time to leave DOE and to take on this new role because my professional and personal growth, in that first year of working at DNV was just it was like a straight line of just so much growth and so much learning. And that I think that's something else that I would just say, like my passion for the industry and the fact that I have I feel so good about where I am right now is that I've allowed myself to kind of take some risks and leaving what was a great job at the Department of Energy and going and trying something new, and leaving what was a great job at DNV and trying something new. Those those opportunities for growth can't be understated. Like I they're just so important. So there's another thing there. don't to not to be open and to be open to taking some calculated risks.
One thing I wanna ask about, which might be showing my, like, nerd alert, is I'm curious, the thing about it is, I love the idea of using wind energy. I mean, I love sustainability, period. How do you also balance that with, I know that there's a lot going on in the oceans with, humans causing pollution and everything. How do you balance that and, respect both ocean life while also using it to make the planet more friendly to other life?
It is interesting, right? We want to put infrastructure into the ocean to help ocean life. Like when it all comes down to it, in the very simplest terms. Um, it is it's there's a balancing process. And for at least in the US, the offshore wind industry, we don't just get to go out to the ocean and say, "Hey, we're going to develop a project here." Sometimes I wish it were that simple, but it is not that simple. There's a huge federal process that from identifying areas that could be potentially developed for offshore wind to then auctioning those areas and then getting permits to develop those areas. And this is a really long process. We're talking about 8 years at the shortest, probably closer to a decade, if not a little bit longer, to develop an offshore wind project. And so we're not rushing into anything headlong. We're taking a very measured approach and trying to understand all of the different environmental impacts that may happen if an offshore wind project were to be installed in a certain ecosystem. And so it's not I would just say that this is a long process, and for me, at least where I'm sitting in my current role, we don't even have the space in the ocean to develop our project yet. So I talk about these projects in Oregon and in the Gulf of Maine like they're a foregone conclusion. The auctions to actually have the rights to develop those projects, those auctions haven't even happened. They won't happen until 2024 at the earliest. So we're in the earliest stages of trying to understand what technology is feasible to deploy there and what is going to work in those ocean environments because they're very different ocean environments between the Gulf of Maine and off of the west coast in Oregon. And the and it's a long I'll just say this, it's a long process. And we try to be, as we're trying to do this in the most responsible manner possible to again protect ocean life, protect ocean users, and also work to stem the the challenge of climate change.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that balance, and I'm so glad that you're working on it because, like I said, the math, not with me. So I'm glad that the people that are really good with the math and the science are like, "No, we're on this."
Yeah, we're trying. We are trying. We are trying, and that's one thing. Again, having grown up, really from a professional perspective within this industry, the people that are working within this industry. I mean, there are so many that I just consider personal friends because I have, again, some of us have kind of grown up professionally in it, and they're such good people. We are working really hard to solve this very challenging problem of deep decarbonization. And we all believe that offshore wind has to be part of that equation.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Because sometimes, with the news, you hear, and it's important that people hear, the serious side of things of people saying time is running out. But it's also nice to hear the stories of people that are like, we are working really hard to combat it.
We are, and that's where we wish we could shorten that 10-year time horizon that I was
I
that
know.
I was talking about. That's very thoughtful, and there are regulatory processes that you have to go through. But yeah, it is. We are working really diligently to do what we can.
Oh, that's great. And so I know you come from a particular place of sustainability, obviously, but I'm wondering for the everyday listener at home, I'm wondering, do you have any tips on what they and their workplaces can do to bring at least a little bit more sustainability into their workplace?
That is it's such a good question, especially as I sit from my home office, because that's the reality of I work outside of DC. My We have our office in Portland, Oregon, and we have a couple of folks that are in the Gulf of Maine in New England, and our corporate headquarters is in Cork, Ireland. One of the best things that I think that we can do is to lean into as much virtual communication and virtual and seeing each other virtually with our faces as possible. Even before the pandemic, when I was working at DNV, we were always on calls that had video chatting enabled. And so I kind of have this cultural mindset of, if you're on a video call, like, you turn your camera on. I think that is so important to be able to create even like a little bit of human connection when we're not physically together. Because I think one of the things that we can do is try to figure out ways that we don't need to travel as much to work together. You can't recreate the physical environment of being in an office. You can't have those organic water cooler chats over Teams. It's nearly impossible, but to try to find ways to create that culture of, like, just even sending a quick message and starting a video chat when you have a spontaneous idea. I think that is going to be so important as we are more virtual and are more spread out, and as people are rightfully asking and sometimes demanding that they not go into a physical office. Well, how do we do that and also maintain some amount of sustainability? And that's really leaning into our virtual world, which I think a lot of us have become comfortable with, and then figuring out the ways to be together that aren't going to create a lot of extra flights. I think if we look at trying to reduce some of our carbon footprint, maybe going to all of the conferences isn't the most necessary and best use of our time. Maybe smaller conferences that are closer to home, or smaller events, again, that are closer to home, would be better from a sustainability perspective.
I'm so glad you said that. And I actually love that, we've talked a lot about remote work likely being the future of the workplace and what's good for the workplace. But it's also kind of nice to know that it's what's good for the world as well.
Absolutely. I mean, if we think about, and again, it has to come on all sides. I think about how challenging it was to do business development just virtually. And business development doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. And I think maybe that partially needs a bit of a mindset change. I really love creating relationships. Well, that is business development. So maybe I do like business development. But it's hard to do virtually when you don't get, I don't know, there's just something about being with people in person. But I think it has to be on both the seller and the buyer side to realize, like, maybe we don't have to be in person for all of it. Maybe there's only, a couple of touch points that we need to actually have, so that we can have some modicum of sustainability, and also better work life balance. And being at home, is always better for me emotionally, and for my family life.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so I'm gonna start using that now whenever if anybody ever mentions going back to the office, which I mean we're fully virtual, but I'll be like, that's not very eco-friendly of you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not walking or riding a bike into work, there is some amount of carbon footprint that you are leaving. It doesn't. I mean, I guess unless you're riding a bus that's fully electric, but most of us will leave some sort of carbon footprint to get to an office.
Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. If you don't mind, we're going to go into a few minutes of our lightning round.
Sounds great.
Excellent. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions. I have to start with one of them because I feel like it's so relevant here. Would you rather explore outer space or the bottom of the ocean?
I mean, I would hope that everyone would be able to figure this one out from everything that
Yeah.
I just said, but absolutely the bottom of the ocean.
Yes. I was like, I feel like that's the most obvious answer in the world. But like, if I don't ask that one, people are gonna be like, why didn't you ask the ocean question?
Yes, ocean, ocean every day and twice on Sundays.
Yeah, yes. And I had the same answer when I got asked that question. If you could time travel, where is the first place you would go?
Ancient Egypt.
Ooh.
I haven't seen the pyramids in real life, but I don't know. I think that there's part of me from a National Geographic that I poured over as a little kid that just it would be so cool. So yeah, ancient Egypt.
Oh, yeah, I love that. What's your favorite mythical creature?
This seems predictable. A mermaid.
I was gonna say, I bet she says mermaid or some sea creature.
Yeah, mermaid.
Oh, yeah. What sport would you compete in if you were in the Olympics?
Winter or summer.
Ooh, either one, whichever one you prefer.
Ooh, I mean, I have no talent in this space whatsoever. So, but gymnastics.
Yay, you picked the right one.
It's the one that
That's my
I
favorite sport. Yeah.
it's the one that I watch the most.
Yeah. Oh,
I
excellent.
love gymnastics.
Yes, it's listeners of the podcast will know I follow gymnastics like other people follow like basketball or football. Like I love gymnastics.
Yeah.
What is the most used app on your phone?
Instagram, and just as a pure consumer.
Yep. That is TikTok for me. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I've been given so much good advice. But one that will probably stick with me forever, and it has a little bit of a backstory, so maybe a little bit too long for lightning round, but I'll try to do it fast. I was watching the Michael Jordan documentary a few years ago, and I was talking to a colleague about it, and I think I was lamenting the fact that I wanted to be like the Michael Jordan of offshore wind or something ridiculous like that. And he said something to the effect of like, "You aren't Michael Jordan. You should be aiming to be Phil Jackson." So I do love basketball. It's probably my favorite sport, but like that's outside of the Olympics. Just and so, but that coaching mentality, like he was like, no, you have to assemble a team. You need to be like you're past basically like you're past your prime to be Michael Jordan. You need to think about yourself as a coach. It was again, it's one of those things that will always remain with me, and I think is some of the best advice, and maybe just super specific to me. But I think that's important. You have you have to realize that as you're growing a team, that you're no longer trying to be Michael Jordan. You're trying to be Phil Jackson.
I love that. I've never thought of that before of being like seeing yourself as the star. And I can tell you, but basketball is in the Olympics. It's just that it doesn't get as much attention because it's already a non-Olympic sport. So people
Yes,
are like, yeah, we
exactly.
watch basketball anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's such good advice. And I might have to steal that. But I'll steal it to be like a gymnastics coach.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so finally, what is one thought that you would want to leave with our listeners?
I think that it's something that we actually touched on earlier. Like, just be open to where your interests and your passions might lead you. And if you can find something that you are passionate about and that you can actually do as a career, like you'll wake up every day doing your dream job. And don't be afraid to take the risks. They're scary, but you never know where they might lead you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Alana. I can't wait for everybody to get to hear your story and your wisdom. I'm so excited.
Thanks, Megan. This was so much fun, and I am so happy to be be part of the roster of some incredible guests that you've had on this podcast.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did when recording it and when listening back to it now. So fun. Let's go ahead and get into our history makers. We have some big ones this week, to the point that I always share 3 of them on our social media accounts. If you're not following us on social media, please follow us on social media. We're most active on LinkedIn and Instagram, but you can follow us anywhere. So I always share 3 of them, and I had a hard time picking out which 3 to share for this week because there were so many cool ones. So to start out, Celia Cruz will become the first Afro-Latina on a U.S. corner. Radhika Ghai became the first Indian woman entrepreneur to have her company reach unicorn status. Dominique Morgan became the first Black trans woman to have a street named after her in Nebraska. Adriana Kugler was nominated to become the first Latina to serve on the Fed's Board of Governors in its 109-year history. Sherry Pocknett became the first Indigenous woman to win a James Beard Award. And Sarah Anthony became the first Black woman to oversee the Michigan legislature's spending. Congratulations to all of our history makers. Check out those who I share on social media, and check out our History Makers podcast every Friday, where you might see some of these in the future. We've had plenty of our past history makers on that podcast, so if any of these stood out to you, tune in, and you never know who you're going to get to hear. Next week, we are going to be talking to April Little. That's going to be another one of Maricella's interviews. If you missed her this week, don't worry, she's back next week. April Little is the founder and CEO of the Little Talent Group. As a career maximalist coach, she empowers high potential and mid-level professionals for the next level of their career via one-on-one sessions. Using her signature career maximalist framework, Rewire, Rebuild, Rebrand, and Realize, she helps her clients maximize their potential by preparing for leadership, curating their influence and communication skills, identifying areas of opportunity within the workplace, and selecting executive sponsors within their organizations that will help champion their candidacy for internal opportunities. Such a cool interview. So cool. Coming up. Join us back next week for that. Ellevate Network drives real results for ambitious women trying to break through the glass ceiling and achieve success in their careers. We offer a platform full of resources and opportunities for growth, all designed to help you unlock your potential. With Ellevate support, you can take the first step toward achieving your professional goals. With a supportive community and tangible resources at your fingertips, you're only one step away from reaching your fullest potential. Join us today and take advantage of our 30-day free trial to start building the career of your dreams. Thanks so much for listening to the Ellevate podcast. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, give us 5 stars, and share your review. You can learn all about Ellevate membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. Thanks so much, and join us next week.